G'day legends, and welcome back to this special episode of The Process of Success. I'm in India and I'm with a special player, Melanie Jones. Mel, thanks for joining us.
No, thanks for having me.
So, as I said, I haven't done an episode, Process of Success episode for a while, so it's really special to have Mel, who's here on IPL commentary. Now, Mel, all of my guests, I try and take them back to where
have had success. Is that what you're going to start with?
Not at
no,
all.
Okay. Pressure.
Take people back to where it all began. How did you start playing cricket?
Pretty much like any other Australian kid. My grandparents lived in a small country town in Victoria called Rutherglen, known for its fantastic wine, particularly fortified wines. My mum grew up there, so every holiday session we'd go back to see Nan and Pa. I had 6 male cousins, all older than myself, so we would just be constantly out in the backyard playing cricket. Now, 6 older male cousins meant that I didn't get to bat a lot, so I was bowling for most of the Australian summers. Around the hills hoist, I was telling the kids before, we had the stock standard rules of, one hand, one bounce, but also if you hit Nan's chook shed, you're out for the summer and all those sorts of things as well. So, I mean, it was a truckload of fun, but I look back on it now and I think a lot of my cricket sort of skill set actually derived from that backyard too, because spiky bush on the cover drive meant that if you got the ball in there, you could keep running until you got the ball out, and as soon as the hand went in, it would cut you, so you'd get heaps of runs. So I was a lot better on the cover drive than I was on the hook shot, which was Nan's chook shed.
Yeah, right. And was there cricket on the TV all the time, and was it all year round, or were you playing other sports as well?
No, I was a bit of a sports nuffy as a kid. Loved playing any kind of sport. Started off did a lot of gymnastics really young, which I thank my mum for immensely. Gymnastics and little athletics, because foundation skills, I certainly put that down to body awareness and fielding, particularly later down the track. Got out of gymnastics when they told me I had to wear a leotard and point my toes. That wasn't really my skill set too much. Played basketball, did a lot of that. High school sport at Elwood High, was great there, doing a lot of volleyball and the likes, but always came back to cricket.
Yeah, right. It's interesting you say that. I've just recently become a parent, and my wife and I have been saying that I think the first thing we'll do is for our daughter is to get her into gymnastics, because of that range of movement, which then is a foundation for any sort of sport or anything you do.
Massively. And it's a shame, because gymnastics as a sport long term is still a wonderful sport, and I think sometimes they get maybe a bit peeved that all these athletes that have gone on to other sporting careers have had a touch point with it, but it hasn't continued with it. But I think they should take credit and a lot of heed to the way in which they've developed sport just across the board internationally. I think it's brilliant.
And it's a fascinating conversation that we could go off on a tangent about whether kids should specialise in the sport at a young age.
No.
Or be broad. You obviously
be broad. I'm a massive believer in being broad, because the touch points in all those other sports, you just you can take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and that starts your little recipe for success if you want to use it in that way. I think the more broader you can be, and there's going to be examples of it not being the case, of people, particularly here in India, where they're into cricket so early and that's all there is, and that does work as well. But I think for your long time enjoyment of it, your understanding of just sport in general and everything, if you can, try as many sports as you can.
Yeah, I completely agree. And now going back to your story, when did you start playing competitive cricket?
Well, backyard was very competitive, I'd just like to say. I was in Little Fs for a while, and then I was lucky enough to go to Elwood High School, and at Elwood High School was a fantastic geography teacher called John Hanscom, and he's the dad of Peter Hanscom. And John he just loved the game immensely, and there was a couple of girls at Elwood High that liked cricket, and he got us together and bandied a school team together, and he was brilliant. He took us on a tour of New South Wales and also to New Zealand when we didn't even know women's cricket existed. So all of a sudden he's going above and beyond for a passion for a couple of girls in the school. It was amazing. And then because we did love it so much, he then and Deb Noonan, who was our phys ed teacher, got us involved. Found a couple of local clubs, so they did all the groundwork for us basically. So I was going back now, aren't we? I reckon my first competitive club game I would have been 14.
Right.
Yeah. So I hadn't played anything other than just backyard cricket and school cricket.
And because there wasn't many girls playing at the time, were you always playing against the same players, or were you mixing in with
No,
the boys?
it was a women's league. The VWCA had the Victorian Women's Cricket Association had a very strong club system back then. There was probably more teams back then than there are now.
Right.
And I'd hate to say also the premier grade cricket back then was probably stronger as well.
Yeah.
We might come back to this, how do you rate success in terms of sport as well. I think a lot of people think that women's cricket in Australia is flying and is majorly successful, and it is at the top level in terms of Australia and WBBL, but I still have some concerns around club cricket, and I think that's probably both for men's and women's cricket at the same point in time. Sorry, I digressed a little bit. So it was a reasonably strong competition. So it was Saturday, Sunday, 1 and 2 day cricket back then, which was still fantastic. On either, typically it was matting. So for all the young people listening, you rolled the mats out, and if you won the toss and were batting, you tended to just loosen it off a little bit. It was a little bit. If you were bowling, you'd pull it a little bit harder so the ball got through.
Yeah.
So
you rolled them out after the toss was done?
Well, sometimes, depending. If it's your home game, I think you certainly learned, the nuances of home ground advantage.
Yeah, awesome. And so you mentioned Peter Handscomb's father. When did you ever get private coaching, and did you have mentors when you were growing up?
Yeah, he was my first ever coach. So we would go into the gym at Elwood High School, and I actually went back there only a couple of months back to do a talk for the school assembly, and the gym is exactly the same.
Oh.
I think I still saw the holes from skied attempts at hook shots in the roof, so I might have to start a little campaign to because that was a long time ago, upgrade that gym. So he was my first ever coach, and he was very much about, as you can see in Pete Handscomb's play, about footwork. Pete played a lot of tennis, but it was a lot about getting up and down the crease and trying to negate any spin and doing all those sorts of things. So we just had a ball at lunchtime. It's probably one of the reasons why I didn't do overly well in Year 12, but we won't go into that at all. Then it was bits and pieces through sort of club, and I got into the state junior system at 15. I was playing under 18s, I think it was. So then the likes of former Australian player Lynn Denham came into play into my coaching. Glenn Murdoch coached us at state, Ken Davis. So you sort of had bits and pieces. It wasn't as big a thing, I think, for me back then in terms of individual coaches. John Scholes did a little bit at the Greg Chappell Cricket Centre, but was lucky enough to have good state coaches and club coaches around to sort of mould me.
And at what age or what point did you, obviously you loved cricket, but what point did you think, okay, I'm reasonably good, I'm pretty good, I can make a career out of this? Yeah,
there's no career, unfortunately. My last game for Australia was 2005 World Cup, which we won in South Africa. And the two sort of monetary components that I always think about, we won the 97 World Cup here in India at Eden Gardens in front of 70,000 amazing fans. It was the most amazing day. And we got all excited because we got the big cardboard cheque with all the zeros on it, thinking we're finally going to get some money out of cricket. And we forgot it was in rupees. So it was about 6 bottles of champagne, I think. And then even 2005, I think the prize money sort of covered the celebrations kind of thing. So there was never a payment to play cricket at all. One of my last games, the room attendant for the game got paid more than what we did because we didn't get paid it. So I think she got $100 for the day. So, so there's no money per se in the game back then. But early doors, when I finally realised there was an Australian women's cricket team, I watched the girls 1988 win the World Cup at the MCG. So it's like the Sharon Treadray, who was my hero. I watched her play. That's when you sort of go, oh, hang on a minute, that's what I want to do. I want to play on the MCG. I want to wear the green and gold. I want to play cricket for Australia. And so progressing through your teenage years and into your early 20s, did you study, and how did you manage your cricket and creating an income and a lifestyle? Thanks Mum, big shout out to you. She was my major sponsor throughout my entire career. Look, it was difficult times. I mentioned my poor showing at Year 12 and then was trying to catch up a lot. So it was, it took me 4 attempts to get into Victoria University, which is the uni I wanted to go to do human movement and phys ed. So in between all that, I went to university in Bendigo for a year. So I was driving up and back, and Bendigo was a 2-hour drive back in those days. twice a week to come back to state training, club training, then go back again. So that all just got a little bit hard at times. So then I pulled out of that, then did some work for Cricket Victoria and Vic Sport administrationally. So I did odds and sods as I was still trying to get into university. And then also you do odds and sods jobs too. So Cricket Victoria doing a lot of sort of game development stuff in schools for boys and girls throughout country, regional Victoria. Stephen Field, who was the regional manager for the Western Waves out that way, did a lot of stuff with him from Mildura down to Warrnambool, and had thoroughly enjoyed it as well. But yeah, so there was always a lot on, just trying to balance things so that you could pay your rent and get your study done, but then also get to training. So they were really long days. They were, it was fitness in the morning, it was days of working, and then trainings at night.
Well, back then there obviously wasn't the money in the game there is now, and all the young players growing up have such an opportunity to make such a beautiful life with all this money that's coming to the game. How did your progression then go from playing club cricket to playing for the state and then playing for Australia?
Yeah, it was probably a pretty normal progression really, in the sense of you go through the pathway system in Victoria, played under 18s and then under 21s. Then at that stage, which I would like to see more and more of within Australia, within the women's program, got on to an Australian youth team, and we played New Zealand in Toowoomba. So that was an under 21 side, and then only 18 months later we came to India, 1994, for a youth tour here, which was just one of the best things. You can ask any of the girls in that tour, one of the best things we ever did, both as a cricketer but also personally as well, just as a life-changing kind of moment, and fell in love with India from that day. And so yeah, so I sort of got into the system that way, and then yeah, I can remember being at the SCG. Victoria had lost another state final to New South Wales, and they announced the team in the pavilion at the SCG, and I was hoeing down a prawn cocktail, not thinking that I was going to get picked at all, and wasn't even really listening. And they said, you got picked, and I'm like, for what? They said, you got to go up. Still prawn cocktail in hand. They're like, give it over. So yeah, so that was in 1997.
Awesome. Well, my first time in India was last year, and I absolutely fell in love with it, and I thought I need to bring some young cricketers back with me, and like you say, not just for the cricket, but for the whole lifestyle and the whole perspective on everything as well. And how many times have you been back now?
And you know what? This is India. This is all right.
There we go.
It'll kick in a
awesome.
second.
Absolutely. So that's one of the reasons I came to India last year, and I absolutely loved it. My first time, and I thought I need to bring other cricketers to experience this. And
but before you came here, what did you think? Were you a bit nervous?
Not at all. I was very open-minded. I'm really always keen to try new things. Yep. And to be honest, my twin brother had spent 3 months on school exchange when he was 16 living in India.
Brilliant. Yep.
My mum's been here a few times, and so I have some sort of understanding, but I try and live with no expectation. I just like to experience things, and whatever happens, happens. And so I came, and I try and live in the moment. So I wasn't getting too excited about it. I wasn't sort of hoping for things. I just wanted to see what, and as sort of you touched on, it's just such a great place. I want to try and bring as many people as I can, and through our content we're fortunate to show people what India is and how great it is. Yeah,
it's interesting you said that too, because I was lucky enough to tour here a number of times with the youth team and the Australian side, and even just touring globally with the team, it's as if you have to play for your country to tour, and I thought that shouldn't be the case, because touring is one of the most enriching experiences you can have, whether or not you're an Australian player or a club player. So I've got a very progressive cricket club that I belong to back home called Essendon Maribyrnong Park, EMP, and I said to the board, I said, I want to take the girls to India, and they went, what do you mean? I said, I think they would get so much out of the touring experience, but also of coming to a completely different culture as well. So we came here in 2011 for 2 weeks and played in Delhi, Chennai and Mumbai. And to this day, so many of them say it was just one of the best things that they've done, full stop, not cricket-wise or anything else. But it just opened their eyes to so many new and wonderful things. It changed the way in which they thought about things and saw things. So yeah, I would feel like India tourist ambassador, but I would say to people that it is worth a contemplate, but definitely a trip too.
Absolutely, I feel like an Indian tourist.
Yeah, I know.
I'm trying to just tell people come. It's amazing. And one of the fathers who's here, his son's they're from Geelong, and he said after they played a game with the Indian group, they integrated, and he said, as you know, when you win a grand final, you have that special bond with people forever. And he said, this is going to be like that. This trip is going to be something special. All these boys and girls who have come from all parts of the world are going to remember forever this time in India.
Completely.
Now going back to you, you obviously then got picked in the squad eating your prawn cocktail.
Yeah.
How did your debut go, and then what were highlights of your career, I suppose?
Yeah, debut was not really memorable, but memorable at the same point in time. Played against Pakistan in Melbourne, and it was one of those horrendous Melbourne summers, so it was 42 every day. Unfortunately for the Pakistan players, they were in the middle of Ramadan as well, so I don't know how they were managing to put on an elite performance at that stage. They were absolutely brilliant. We played at Mount Waverley at Wesley College, so this is the difference between playing for Australia back then and now. Belinda Clark and Lisa Kitely put on hundreds. They put on an absolute truckload, and I came in with, I think it was a couple of overs to spare, just going the tonk, and got caught for a very inauspicious. Did I even? It must have been 2. I think it was 2. Isn't that awful? I can't remember. So yeah, that was the debut one-day international anyway.
Right, the test debut was a little bit better.
Test debut was slightly better, yeah. So Ashes tour, which was look, dream come true. Like, I'd been lucky enough. I shouldn't say lucky enough. I'm going to stop saying that because you work your backside off. Played in the '97 World Cup here in India, which we won, and then '98 went to England for Ashes tour. And the team that I played with for the majority of my career, I think, was some of the best cricketers that Australia's ever produced. It was a magnificent group of individuals led by Belinda Clark. Went over for the Ashes tour, and it was a full-on Ashes tour. It was 5 Test matches, which I don't think we're ever going to see again, unfortunately. So it was a long tour. And
just to give us some more context, you weren't paid on tour, like you were.
No.
Did you get?
So it was leave. So it was pure leave. So you lost money basically. Yeah. You got a per diem each day, but the per diem wasn't a lot. Once laundry in England, as I think everyone knows, is exceptionally expensive. So you'd have breakfast, and you might be tucking a few bread rolls and jam butter in for lunch, and then you'd sort of see the day out kind of thing. So we got to England. So it was 5 one-days as well, and full Test series, and it was just the most amazing experience. One, because you actually got to pull on the baggy green, which was unbelievable. The first Test we played in was at Guildford in Surrey. I'll have to say it because I know all the players there will remind me, it was an absolute road. It was runs galore. And yeah, it was a road. In the terms of the day, they were hot days too. So I think it just fell into our favour as well in terms of conditions. And I remember I was in the 90s for ages, and it wasn't as if you talk about the nervous 90s. I wasn't really nervous. I remember actually smoking some and just hitting the field. And I was just saying to myself, just don't let this one slide. Because the other thing was I'd never scored 100 at any level. Yeah. So it wasn't just for Australia. It was a couple in Nan's backyard, but I don't think they count on the Cricinfo website. So yeah, I can remember it, got it backward of point, and yeah, it was just sheer elation really. It was and a little bit of, I think there was a lot of shock too, because you get it and you're like, what do you do? Like, I'd never really gone and hit one before. I'm like, what am I doing here? Am I taking the hat off? Am I? So yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. But playing a full Test series was an absolute honour. And
in your own game, I like to ask all our guests, did you have any pre-ball routines, or how did you switch on and switch off, and what did you do to get yourself focused every ball? Yeah,
when I first started, I started off as a bowler. So I played Aussie juniors as an opening quick, and then I had some back issues, and in the time I was getting over that was just batting more and more. And I think if I look back at it now, I was probably always had a better mind frame and technique to become a better batter than I was a bowler.
Similar story to Adam Bogus. He started as a quick bowler and then a Chinaman.
Yep.
He was our second guest on this podcast.
Oh, right, okay.
So he went through his story and then he started to bat, but more and more, made his career as a batter.
There you go. So started batting more and more, and I think most people would sort of say I was sort of very much sort of see ball, hit ball kind of person. And then I went through a bit of a bad patch, and that's when I actually started thinking more about the game rather than just doing more about the game. So, you know, there's one thing to be able to hit 1,000 cover drives in the nets, but you don't get 1,000 covered balls in that area to hit in the game. So I'm practicing something that I get probably 1 or 2 chances in a game to do, which you can do, but outside of that, what else am I doing and how am I getting myself ready for all those other deliveries and the like. So I worked a lot with Brian Harper, Sam Harper's dad. He was outstanding for my game, and we also worked a lot on batting routines, and it was when I first really started to bring it into my game, and it changed things immensely. I got picked back into the Australian team after a solid summer of doing this, and it was really, to start with, I had to do it very deliberately. So it was very hands-on grip, keywords being spoken at that point in time, right foot down, left foot down, exactly where the bat tap was, the look up, the keyword again, the switch on word. And I did it every ball, every training, every club game. And club cricket for me was a big space, and you don't want to downgrade club cricket, but it was your practice zone as well. So yes, you want to score runs for your club, and you'd negate it so that you'd still win for your club, but there was moments out there that you were trying to develop your own game, which at the end of the day would help your club anyway, sort of thing. Yeah. So and it was very deliberate, like everyone sort of said it, and then as time went on, it became less and less deliberate, but it was always there.
More subconscious.
Because it was a habit now. It was just that routine was just sort of, it was always there. So, and it helped me immensely. And then if you go through a little bit of a trough or something, you can just pick up on it again. It just goes, am I still going through that? Oh yeah, no, that'll, okay, just go through. Even if it was a couple of balls in the middle of your innings, or if it was a longer period of time, but you always had that baseline to go back to.
What were your keywords? What were your switch on?
Yeah, what seam. So rather than watch the ball, so that was the last word for me was about the seam, and the other one was clear mind. Yeah. So whatever's happened before is completely irrelevant. The pieces that were relevant you take in your process, but just clear mind. Watch the seam.
Yeah, awesome. That's something Chris Rogers talks a lot about. He's a good friend of mine. He talks about you've got to watch the ball. A lot of people say watch the ball, but it's about sort of picking up something.
It's a minute focus rather than a.
Yeah.
I mean, the ball is quite small, but when you say ball, you're still you're in the hand area of the bowler kind of thing. Yeah. For me, a lot of it was because then that seam gives me the information. The ball doesn't really. Ball can give me line and length. Yeah. The seam will give me line and length. It'll give me outswing, cutter, what have it be.
And now you won 2 World Cups, you played in the Ashes, you've done it all. How did you deal with pressure?
Yeah, probably badly if you look at my career stats. It was interesting. It was I think also because we weren't full-time cricketers, and in a way I think that helped me in my career now and where I am now as a commentator in comparison. But I had a couple of I got in and out of the Australian team numerous times, and so some would say that I didn't handle the pressure that well. A lot of the pressures for me probably came from things that were going on external to cricket, and how you manage that while you're playing. There was 2004, there was a lot going on my family side. We had a death in the family and the likes, and then you're away touring in India, and you don't have your same network of people around you. And 2004 was when the tsunami hit in Chennai as well, and we were in Chennai at the time. So there's all these sorts of things going on, and the world was a lot less connected back then as well. So there wasn't just the automatic FaceTime, where we're all okay sort of thing, or I need some assistance and that sort of stuff. But in saying that, the resilience seems to be the buzzword of the decade sort of thing. It's your ability to find your own way out of it. And you mentioned it before about your own career. You got to where you wanted to go to in Middlesex and you thought, oh, I've sort of made it, but then you're like, well, I haven't really. So finding it your own way out of that, I think it's probably helped me long term. It probably didn't help my cricket at the time, but if I look at bigger picture stuff now, you sort of think, oh, okay, I can certainly take a positive out of it.
Yeah, awesome. And you've mentioned Sam Harper's father and Pete Handscomb's. Does that now give you a soft spot for those two guys when you
massively? Oh, don't you worry about that. When the Australian team was picked for the World Cup, I was, where's Handscomb? Definitely. And look, and watching Sam go about things in the Big Bash this year, you know, and it's hard commentating too, because I think a lot of people know the connection as well, and you don't want to get too, you know, you got to keep a little bit of, you know, neutrality about it all. We can just keep going. This is going to, you know where we are.
Guys watching YouTube, we're losing power. We've lost it once already, but we're just going to keep rolling.
Cool. We're probably better in this dim light anyway. So yeah, you do have soft spots. I did a wonderful interview with Sanju Samson a couple of days ago, and I'd never met him before, and he was kind enough to give me his time, and he's just a ripping young guy. So you have a soft, you do. It's hard not to. It's like, and parents. I know you're gonna. How many kids have you got now?
Oh, just one.
Just one. Okay, so you do have a favourite. Yeah. So there we go. When you have two, you know, you have soft spot for people for different reasons. So yeah. Yeah.
So we've sort of started to cover a little bit more of your post-career. You now are a wonderful commentator. You're travelling the world commentating. How did all that come about? How did you move from being a player into being a commentator that travels the world?
Well, I didn't handle the pressure well, and I got dropped from the Australian team, and I missed an Ashes tour. Right. So that was early 2000s. But I happened to be over in England. I did a lot of coaching. I always wanted to get into high performance coaching. So I was taking myself over to England to work in different settings. I was with Surrey Cricket over there for 3 years, off the back end of working 3 winters in South Africa, doing girls cricket development in townships and the like. So I was in England at the time. The Aussies were touring. Chris Matthews, who's now the CEO of the WACA, and former Australian wicketkeeper, she was the manager of the team, and she was supposed to do the commentary for Sky Sport. Because at that time, Sky Sport had a deal with the ECB that part of their broadcast contract, so they had to at least do 1 women's game a year. So Chris couldn't do it because she was manager. She said, oh look, Mel Jones is over here. She might be interested. And so they rang and asked, and I went, no. I said, why would I want to commentate on a game I want to be playing in? Like, that's just, no. And they said, I'm going to pay you 300 quid. And I said, tell me where, when and what to wear. It's the most I've ever been paid. And it was brilliant. So I went along, it was the one day international. So that was back in, I think it was 2001. And it was with the likes of, I was trying to think the other day who was in there. I think it was Bob Willis, Paul Allett, Graham Foxy Fowler, and Charles Colville. And had no idea what I was doing. Got in there and they just sort of said, so you just said something and put the microphone down and...
So no sort of prompting, or they didn't give you a brief or anything?
No, nothing at all. Sort of got through the game, that was it. Carried on with what I was doing and thought, well, I've had a crack at that, that's interesting. And never thought anything would come of it from that. But then kept going back and working with Surrey, so I was there over the summertime. So because I'd done it the year before, they said, oh, would you like to do it again? So I thought, oh, 1 more game's not going to hurt. And so it went from, for the next 4 or so years of just doing 1 game a year because I was over there. And then 2009 was probably the big shift for women's cricket. The ICC took over Women's World Cups, and they did a broadcast component around it, which was in Sydney. So I think they did 7, 8, 9 games, round games and the final. And that's when I was introduced to Alan Wilkins, who's been a bit of a mentor for me from the commentary side of things. Leslie Macram and Danny Morrison commentated along with Belinda Clark, Debbie Hockley and myself. So there's 6 of us working on that, and had an absolute ball, and still just thought, oh well, that's it. So I was still working. So I came back after 05 World Cup. Primary school teacher, then worked for Cricket Victoria in game development, trying to get into the coaching side of things, and that didn't quite work out. And then got out of that, and a mate of mine, Alison Tranquilli, she was cook when she played basketball for Australia, actually getting inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame 10 days' time.
Wow.
She started a management company for female athletes, predominantly basketballers, a few netballers, so I started doing a bit with her, and a company called Elite Sports Properties, which is now TLA, Craig Kelly's company in Australia, bought Majestic out, and so all of a sudden I was a talent manager, sort of Jerry Maguire but without the money style, for athletes, and it was just like, how did I end up here? I hope the athletes I managed didn't listen to that, because I sort of knew what I was doing. So I was in that for a while, and still, but in the background there was more and more cricket coming up, more women's cricket, and then all of a sudden 2015 the IPL came up and things started to get a bit of a stretch at work and commentary. I wasn't putting enough time into preparing for commentary as I'd like, and not giving the people I was managing enough time either. So it got to that sort of, the pointy end of making a decision. So 2000, what are we now, 19? It was November 2016. Made the decision to give this a crack full time.
So most paid off.
Well, it was the most nervous. I've never been, that nervous making a decision in my life, because it's freelance, so you sort of get a little bit scared about that kind of concept. But it's all worked out.
You got to jump in the deep end sometimes.
That's it. And for a non-swimmer, that's very scary.
And you mentioned you had a thirst for coaching. Do you do any coaching at the moment? Are you getting involved in coaching?
It's very difficult too. So I was away 8 months last year with commentary, and it's similar-ish this year with IPL, World Cup, and then double Ashes. And then once I get back, so I'm with Fox Sports. It's a hectic summer, and you're away, you're on the road so much. It's really difficult. I did a bit of satellite coaching probably about 2 years ago with some of our club-based players in Victoria, but unfortunately time is quite restrictive. But it's as I've got a teaching background, my mum's a teacher, I did human movement at Victoria University. I've got a real thirst for playing a part, whether it's a small role or a big role in people's development. So that's why I love the coaching. Hopefully I can do it in some other way, shape or form.
Awesome. And you mentioned off camera you're off to the World Cup in a few weeks. And you're at the moment, you're in your downtime, you're preparing for that. What does a commentator do to prepare? How do you spend your time? And you're obviously become one of the world's best commentators, and it's not through chance, it's through preparation.
We're getting the wind up too here. The assistants, going to string this one out. No. Look, preparation for me is, and I think that comes from, I suppose, when you've gone to university and you want to prepare for a test, or you're an athlete and you're preparing for a season, you put the time in. And for commentary, I don't think that should be any different. And the biggest challenge for me is having come from predominantly doing a lot of women's cricket to start with, commentary where you sort of know a lot of the players, to then going, I'm probably 75% now commentary on the men's game. There is so much cricket content these days that it's difficult to keep up with everything that's going on in the world. As much as you want to stay up and watch cricket 24/7 on Fox Cricket, it becomes quite...
And to be honest, as a spectator watching a lot of cricket, I get frustrated with some of the older commentators, especially they used to be on Channel 9, I'm not going to mention any names, but who it seems they don't do any research and they continue to say the same things, and they're often saying the wrong things. So when someone like yourself who puts the time and effort in, has a depth of knowledge of the person behind the cricketer, it's refreshing, and it makes it so much better to watch. And
I think for me, one of the big things for me is that you shouldn't as a commentator get caught up watching the game as the former player in a lot of sense, and I'm going to probably explain that a little bit, because people want to hear your take on the game, but at the same point in time you need to know that the audience is a variety of different people. So you need to educate new people to the game, or older people to the game who don't know about a certain area. So there's a massive, for me, educational factor. There's an engagement factor, particularly with whether it's Test match or T20 cricket. You want people to I suppose that's the other one, is enjoyment. So you want to engage them into the conversation, but there's got to be that entertainment factor too, and they've got to go away going, I learnt something, I really enjoyed it, whether it was 5 minutes or they watched the whole day's play. So to do that, you've got to be prepared. So you've got to have not just the stats and the real hard data, which we know cricket people love, but you've got to have a little bit of something to go around it.
Awesome.
That was my short version too.
Yeah, we could talk all day, and it's been an absolute pleasure listening to your story, but you are on limited time here at KIAC. We're at Karnataka Institute of Cricket. Mel's been very kind to give us her time. I will finish with a few more questions before we wrap up. Where do you see women's cricket going now? It's obviously evolved immensely, and the women's IPL is coming up. Where do you see women's cricket? If you look outside these doors, there's nearly as many young girls as boys. It's awesome to see.
Oh, it made my heart smile walking in this morning. It was absolutely brilliant to see, because the big thing for me too is not just that there's a pathway for young girls now and they feel welcome in this kind of environment, which they certainly do, which I love. It's that the boys grow up just knowing that girls play cricket, so it just normalises things, and that gets rid of all that hoo-ha, and we can just get on with developing the game. I think the big thing for me with women's cricket is that a lot of the money is still at the pointy end, so things are looking a lot better. T20 World Cups are fantastic, women's IPL's growing, all those sorts of things, but for me, we need to be really strategic and have a vision for how the game grows from the grassroots all the way through. So that needs people to sit down at the table and get it whether it's a state base or their club, all the way through to a national level, and have that vision. And they've got to be brave and bold enough, and you've gone through this yourself, to not waver when things get a little bit tough or they think it's not going to happen. It's a long-term goal, and unfortunately a lot of people like the quick fixes. Things like this aren't a quick fix. The other big thing I would say is that it's not just an overlay of the men's game on top of the women's game. Yes, cricket's cricket, but the women's game can bring a value add to the men's game by allowing them to play the game and be administrated and coached in a slightly different way, and all of a sudden the guys might go, actually, we'd never thought about that. That might be a value add from the men's side of things, or vice versa. But don't just think, here's the path, we've already created the path, so you should go along this path. I think there's a new path that we should be allowed to. It's sort of almost like a blank canvas, allowed to paint.
Well, when I was here last year, I went back to Australia, and I was telling people, I thought the younger cricketers, the girls' skills were better than the boys' skills. The boys had the power, but the girls are better listeners, and they pay attention better than the boys. And I was just fascinated with how good the young girls here in India were.
There's a big thing, and that's another thing, is the research, scientifically, coaching is still very male skewed as well. I think there needs to be so much more done on the coaching of female athletes, but the bodies of female athletes, how that, particularly cricket, with bowling in particular, it's such a ridiculously mad action. Hip angles are different, all those sorts of things. How do we find a girl who can bowl 130 clicks? Are we teaching them something, can we tweak it a little bit so that we can get that extra speed because of different physiques and all those sorts of things? We haven't done a lot of qualitative research in that kind of area, so there's so many exciting things to be able to be done in and around the women's game that I think will benefit the entire game.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, the final few questions which I ask all of my guests is, why do you play cricket? Why did you play cricket?
Right, that's a really good question. I love the competition in the backyard with my cousins. Absolutely love that. And when I was a young kid in Australia growing up, and I've mentioned this a few times, is that Melbourne and Rutherglen was a very white space. There wasn't a lot of brown or black faces around. When the West Indies toured Australia, they were kings. Viv Richards, Clive Lloyd, Malcolm Marshall. So I connected. My dad's from Trinidad, so I didn't meet him until I was 16, so he wasn't part of my growing up at all, in terms of the physicality point of view. But he knew the West Indian cricketers, so when they toured, I'd get Wisden magazine sidelined them. So there was definitely a connection point to, I can resonate, I look like you guys a lot more than I do my family, even though I love my family. So there was definitely, I felt connected to the West Indies, and they were touring and they were doing really, really well, so I could say I was West Indian, so I think there's a little bit of that as well.
Yeah. And finally, what's your definition of success?
I think it's very individual. I think too many people get caught up in success being what other people say it is. People say that I've had a successful career. I would look at certain parts of it and probably say, because I'm on TV doesn't make me successful. Have I allowed people to enjoy the game through my commentary? I would class that as being successful. Now, I'll never be able to sort of, figure that out because, there's no survey. I don't want to do a survey, though, not with social media these days. But so I think people need to figure out, and I've only just realised this recently through a couple of courses back home, is what's important to you. You've got to figure out what's important to you and then try and shape your routines and habits and the like around that. And if you're brave enough to continue with that for a long period of time, you'll be exceptionally happy, and I reckon that's where your success lies.
That's a great answer, and it's funny, I've done 20 odd interviews now or conversations, and everyone has a different answer, but it often comes back to that being happy, and it's very individualised. Now, how can our followers, our listeners, our viewers, how can they follow you? What's the best place to follow your journey?
Oh, there we go. Both on Twitter and Instagram at the moment. If you search Mel Jones, isn't that awful? I don't know my Twitter account, Mel Jones _33 and Mel Jones 72 on Instagram. And I'm actually collating a bit of content at the moment. I mentioned chatting to Sandra Sampson. I've got Marcus Stoinis tomorrow to do a new piece that hopefully will be out in the next couple of weeks in and around a bit of travel and cricket as well.
Awesome. Well, we will link Mel's social handles in the show notes, and we'll certainly be giving the travel show a plug. So
awesome. Appreciate
thank you so much, Mel.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
No, I really have thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you, and I'm sure our listeners have got a huge amount of value out of that. So
Hope
cheers,
so.
Mel.
Cheers.
Thank you.